Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to AATF first webinar. We're kicking off our virtual series, and this is one of the first ones with our key partners, SAIMC and TECHNEWS. So we'd like to welcome you all here today to our official launch webinar. And today we're going to hear more about the SAIMC and TECHNEWS, who are our official partners on the Africa Automation Technology Fair. Later on, we're going to tap into the knowledge of the renowned futurist and public speaker, Pieter Geldenhuys. So, representing the SAIMC and TECHNEWS is Jane van der Spey and Johan Martens. But before I hand over to them, let me tell you a little bit more about Jane and Johan. Johannes joined the SAIMC in 1985, and he's worked in the industry as an electrical engineer, instrumentation manager, IT manager, project manager, and quality auditor. He is the director and CEO of the SAIMC NPC and a director of MESA SA. Jane joined TECHNEWS in 1985 as the personal assistant to the founder of the company, Ray Beaumont. Before working in several other departments within the company, like production, circulation, and sales, all of which gave her an in-depth understanding of publishing effective trade journals. Jane took over the business management and sales of SA Instrumentation and Control in 2000 and Motion Control in 2005, when the title was purchased. She has led her team to build the publication into the preeminent publications in the sector, highly regarded by all readers and advertisers alike. So, without further delay, I will now hand you over to Jane.
Thank you. When you think about things that work well together in life, a few immediately come to mind. Bonnie and Clyde, Mickey and Minnie, peanut butter and jam, chocolate and pinotage, and then of course we have our own very favorite ones, SA Instrumentation and Control and the SAIMC, SA Instrumentation and Control and Africa Automation Technology Fair, SAIMC and Africa Automation Technology Fair, all a bit of a mouthful when said like that, but not only successful pairings, but together making a successful trifecta. I think we have a slide which shows that quite nicely, with Mickey and Minnie as well. As Chardonnay introduced me, my name is Jane van der Spey, and I'm the product manager of the magazine SA Instrumentation and Control, which is published by TECHNEWS. And I'm also part of the PR and marketing team for the SAIMC. I'm here today to give a little bit of background on both and on our relationship with Reed Exhibitions and Africa Automation Technology Fair. The SAIMC began its life as the Instrument and Control Society of Southern Africa in 1957, and I had a great trip down memory lane when I accessed Johan Martens' commemorative letter from 2012 when the Society turned 55. We'll make this available to everybody as it makes fascinating reading with anecdotes from some of the first members and presidents. Looking at our sophisticated and corporate exhibition stands nowadays, these grew out of the seeds planted at exhibitions such as those run by the SAIMC at the WITS Physics Laboratory, and from which Ken Baker, a stalwart in the industry and long-term member of the Society, was eventually banned as a result of his overzealous marketing efforts. Something to do with rotary switches, solenoid valves, cow's udders, and Scotch whiskey. It appears that the value of the SAIMC back in the day lay in education, training, and standards for the industry, helping with site visits and technical lectures, much of which still forms the backbone of what we do today. And here comes a new slide, I think, with the new name. Until as recently as last week, the SAIMC was called the Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Measurement, and Control. After a membership survey, the board decided to change the measurement to mechatronics to embrace mechatronics in line with the changes in the industry. Today, the long name is the Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Mechatronics and Control, but of course that still shortens to the SAIMC. The SAIMC has recently become a non-profit company with a chairman and board of directors, which incorporate the 7 branches under the leadership of branch general managers. This helps meet the demand for us to illustrate sound corporate governance. Each branch is autonomous, and we currently have approximately 750 paid-up members and 42 companies that are either national or regional members, sometimes both, who contribute to the success of the SAIMC and are in turn recognized as such. Another core strength of the SAIMC lies in our affiliation with Automation Federation, other associations, government bodies like EXA, universities, key industry players, and of course, Reed Exhibition. In a nutshell, our passion, drive, and goals are to become the de facto voice of automation in South Africa. And to achieve this, we have identified 3 strategic goals for 2023. The education and training, I think there's a slide for this. To have a registered automation degree, exposure at schools and universities, link our suppliers to end users for value-based partnerships, training and services, full operational training program to establish partnerships with end users to assist in recruitment and talent identification, be able to give out 100 bursaries, create vendor-independent content for technology evenings. Our growth goals, I think there should be a slide for that, a simplified structure for membership and governance. We want to more than double our membership, grow our international base, have 10 full-time employees, and become a leader in digital marketing, including social media platforms. Our thought leadership goals, there's a new slide for that. Increase the adoption rate of Automation Industry 4.0, have an elevated image in government, a stronger representation at SABS and the IEC, and increased government funding to drive skills and bridge the legislation gap, assist the country to become a global player again, and become a recognized advisory body generating white papers. I mentioned passion earlier, and this is one of the single most important ingredients in the mix, and our branch committees and excos are all run very passionately by busy volunteers. A measure of this passion is that instead of this long-standing association aging gracefully and going quietly into the sunset, it's better than ever before, more structured, more energized, and adding more value to our members. In the early years, the SAIMC affairs were reported on in the Pulse magazine, but around 1996, a move was made to appoint an official mouthpiece for the Institute. Discussions were held between Jack Yelland and Ray Beaumont, both of whom apparently put forward credible proposals. The consensus went in favor of SA instrumentation and control, and it is rewarding to see that this decision has stood the test of time, and it's a relationship which we guard jealously and nurture intensely. I'm sure most of you here today, wherever here is in this virtual online world, know that SA Instrumentation and Control is a monthly magazine produced in print and online with twice weekly electronic news briefs. I think there's a slide which shows exactly that, thank you. Allowing our content to be accessed whenever and however engineers want to read it. Published, as I mentioned previously, by TECHNEWS Publishing, we've been producing high-quality technical magazines for over 35 years. Apart from the SAIMC news and feedback, SA Instrumentation and Control provides relevant insights into all the major areas and technologies concerning automated processes. All members of the SAIMC receive a free copy of the publication each month and are, of course, part of our key target market as readers. The circulation in excess of 4,500 rand, 4,500, not rand, is ABC audited, and our readers are all well qualified, experienced engineering and technical personnel, corporate management and R&D professionals. Our editors are all technical and our content is unbiased, and we are unashamedly niched and focused, and we like to think the best there is. During lockdown, we've been fortunate to be able to continue printing and distributing our magazines, although of course our online content has also been invaluable. In business-to-business publishing, print has always been an important component, and whilst of course we'd all like a crystal ball as to exactly how the future will play out, we firmly believe that this will still remain the case. Life is all about relationships, professional and personal, of course. I think there's a new slide coming up, and one that I really coveted was with what was then the Process Expo back in the day. I saw it as a potential match made in heaven, with the exhibition's target market being the same as our readers, and this was borne out by the attendees at registration more often than not quoting us as the source for finding out about the exhibition itself. To my delight, we were given the green light with the 2011 exhibition, and we published the first standalone show previews and show guides. The comment from the then organizer when she saw them for the first time was that she had goosebumps, and we are proud that this relationship has also stood the test of time, and we are now honored to be associated with Read exhibitions, hopefully with lots more goosebumps to come. There's the next slide coming up. With the SAIMC and SA Instrumentation and Control already having independently strong relationships with Africa Automation Technology Fair, it was a hop, skip, and a jump until we all worked more collaboratively and cohesively. And Read Exhibitions has recently become a member of the EXCO team of the SAIMC and will become a huge part of our success in achieving our growth goal. Never before have we had such muscle behind us. And again, the combined reach of the SAIMC, Read Exhibitions, and TECHNEWS will go a long way to help us all and in turn deliver something of value to our respective members, visitors, and readers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. We really value the partnership with TECHNEWS and the SAIMC. And as you said, there's a very long future ahead of us. So we'd like to open the floor for some questions. If you do have any questions, please type them to all, and we will respond to them through a voice, depending on what the question is. So we've got about 5 minutes that we can allocate to questions. So please feel free to send it through the Q&A icon that's at the bottom of your screen. So, Johan, we have our first question. The question is, what are the trends in the industry? Can I hand over to you to answer?
Sure. I think Pieter will also touch on that a little later in his presentation. But what we are seeing in industry is the whole move to digital and all the different aspects of that. There are a lot of words being thrown around, and like a digital twin and augmented reality and things like that. But in our field, we will definitely in South Africa see a lot about process factory automation and the move of mechatronics into the engineering disciplines of the Engineering Council of South Africa as evidence of what the changes are. In the past, the SAIMC was part of electrical, and as we all know, automation is much more than electrical. And the Engineering Council of South Africa now saw that and brought in mechatronics as another engineering discipline. Interesting enough, they also brought in computers as another discipline in engineering, two fields that have never been there before, which is just an indication of where this whole thing is moving. The other thing is we are driven more and more by individuals. You can sit in a small township and develop a program or develop a system and sell it from as if you were a huge company. And that is also going to change the way that we think. It's no more going to be only the big companies designing things. We will see a lot of designs coming from small people as well, selling and making things for industry.
Great, thanks for that, Johan. We have a couple of other questions. How will the SAIMC work with universities and educational providers to sculpt skill sets the industry needs?
We are fortunate enough to have one of the deans of the engineering faculties as chair of our education and training advisory council. That was initiated quite a while ago, but we battled to get a person, the ideal person in that position. And Prof. Ben van Wyk from Nelson Mandela University is chairing that leg of our interface between universities and educational providers, which is a huge benefit for both us and education, because industry and education seem to have drifted apart from each other over the last couple of years. And this is the ideal opportunity where we can start working together again.
Great, thank you. How is the industry response to building management systems with regards to energy monitoring and reporting?
We have seen a couple of examples when we go to some of our national members, and you can see they have started implementing this, but on a worldwide basis, the Automation Federation has initiated the whole automation discipline, and building management being one of them. In South Africa, we do not have the staff at the moment or the personnel that drives this, but worldwide, the SAIMC is on the board of the Automation Federation, and that is one of the branches of automation that is currently being defined. In South Africa, we will look after factory and process automation, and the UK plus a couple of other countries will work on building automation.
Great, thank you. So last question for this question and answer session. What does the SAIMC think the future of automation technology will look like?
I think that is a question that Pieter will also be able to answer in more detail. But from the SAIMC point of view, automation technology will take over most of the disciplines in the sense that it will be incorporated in everything. I can remember in the year 2000, we were busy with the Y2K project. And one of the items in the Y2K project was to make sure that the computers will not lock everybody out of the system. We looked around and only a control and instrumentation department actually had computers that we had to be worried about. And as a matter of interest, one of our systems that we were working on would have locked everybody out at the end of that 1999. And we had to set the date back a couple of years to prevent that from happening until we could shut down the plant and change the whole system so that it can incorporate the new dates. If we try that same experiment today, I think we will be have more than our work cut out for us, because automation, computers have integrated all facets of engineering. It's not just in electrical and control systems anymore. But I see Pieter's on the line, and he will be able to take that further and explain in more detail. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Johan. It's really great to hear how the industry has moved along and obviously adapted, and it's the perfect industry to adapt to the current times as well. As Johan had mentioned, Pieter is on the line. So we'll hear from Pieter Geldenhuys, who's a futurist and public speaker, on how he envisions the future. Pieter is known for his provocative and novel predictions about the future. As a public speaker, he has more than 800 radio and more than 1,000 public appearances under his belt, and has spoken to audiences in more than 20 countries. He was the previous vice chair of the Innovation Focus Group at the International Telecommunication Union in Geneva, Switzerland. He's the founder and director of the Institute for Technology, Strategy and Innovation, aligned with the Northwest University. Over the past decade, he has guided more than 3,000 students and more than 100 innovation projects with large technology companies in India, the Middle East, and Africa. Pieter believes the only way to effectively predict the future is to create it, which I completely agree with. So Pieter, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chardonnay. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity. Johan, thank you for putting me on the spot over there. I hope that I'll be able to provide a brief insight into some of the key challenges that will face the automation industry, but also the opportunities that will be unlocked in the years ahead. I've been asked to give 3 talks, each 20 minutes each, and the 3 talks can broadly be categorized as follows. The first one, we're going to talk about how do we explore the future. What are the key mega trends that will shape our world from a geopolitical perspective, and how will it influence the economy and specifically the automation industry? The second talk will be all around how do we unlock the opportunities within the space. So in a changing socio-political environment with COVID-19 having a massive impact on behavior patterns, what are the opportunities that can be unlocked by practitioners in that space? And then the third key talk will be around how do we navigate an uncertain future, a future where it becomes far more difficult in order to predict what will happen, and what are the key challenges from a management and a strategic perspective, how to navigate an uncertain and unpredictable space. So a brief overview, those will be the 3 key talks. And today's talk will be about exploring the future, some of the key major mega trends that will influence our lives that might be a little bit beyond our direct control, but we'll talk about the creation of the future in the second one, once we understand the environment that we operate in. So thank you so much. Let me get cracking, guys. If you can give me access to the screen share on this side, I'll be able to start my presentation. And then we're going to start off by talking about some of the major trends that will shape our world and how this will change the world around us. So I just want to, there you go. I've been made the host. Thank you so much, Chardonnay. I really, really appreciate that. And this is part of our journey. So I hope that my screen, let me just share my screen. Let's get cracking on the presentation and let's get started. Chardonnay, a point of reference. I just want to know if you guys can see my screen and that I haven't activated my automated voice environment. Hopefully that is fine. Let's get started.
We can see your screen.
Thank you so much. So let's get started on the headlines from the future and what we can anticipate in the next couple of years from a geopolitical perspective, from an economic perspective, and how that influences our world. So briefly, what is the role of a futurist? Literally, it is defined as building the capacity to understand and see the implications and meaning of change. And what it boils down to is that every single one of us, if we're in business, we need to become a futurist as well. That means how do we anticipate the change? What are the models we utilize in order to get a deeper understanding of the world that lies ahead? I'm there to just guide you in terms of some of the key challenges that we will face in years ahead. Bill Clinton said this a good couple of years ago, but boy, was he right. You know, he said there'll be more change in the next 15 years than there's been in the last 50 years. I think we can say, you know, if we said that in January, there'd be more change in the next 3 months than there's been in the last 10 years. So fundamental changes that is coming our way, but it goes beyond just the COVID-19 scare. There's fundamental changes in our structure of our economy, of the technology that will be unlocked in years ahead, as well as a variety of other cycles that we need to be aware of. And I'll share with you some of those insights. The question always is, what will the future look like? And no one can really look at a crystal ball. But this fella, a guy called William Gibson, he said, the future has already happened. It is just unequally distributed. So we can highlight a number of trends and highlight a couple of key insights that we anticipate will happen in the not too distant future, but we cannot accurately predict when it will happen. And that's the scary part. that sometimes the technology is there, but the consumer behavior patterns might not be amenable to adopt the technology. And that's also an important key element, specifically as far as automation is concerned. Just because automation is there and it makes financial sense doesn't always mean it's adopted in the societies or in the markets we want them to be adopted. And we'll share with you some insights of how to unlock and how to address that very vexing problem. So when we talk about exploring the future, it's not about predicting it. It's about saying, what are the technologies around us that could define our future? What could happen? And that's going to be part of our discussion. What are the trends that we see where everyone agrees upon that these are the major mega trends that will define our future? In subsequent talks, we'll talk about how can we identify possibilities within this technology matrix in order to unlock the opportunities of the future, which will allow us literally to create what the future should be. But remember, choosing that path means you have to do something different. It also means you have to change your business model. And that's where automation plays a massive role, because it allows organizations to reframe their business model and create an opportunity of productivity improvement within that space. Later on, we'll talk about how do we navigate the future, but more about that a bit later. So let's talk about this coronavirus thing and briefly talk about its impact on the world around us. We've already seen the automation of cleaning of hospitals. Yes, those things you see in front of you is called UVC robots, or ultraviolet robots. The ultraviolet rays are categorized into ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, and ultraviolet C. A and B doesn't work to kill the virus, C does. But this stuff is lethal. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to be close to it when it's on, because it can literally damage the DNA in your eyes as well as on your skin, but it kills the virus. So what we've seen is numerous of these robots have started to emerge in hospitals as they then clean the hospital wards. But imagine using this on an aircraft, where as the aircraft lands or at night, they've got these robots with arms that can be extended, and you can literally kill all the viruses in an aircraft. Imagine further that you put some of these ultraviolet rays inside the air circulation system inside aircraft. And although we don't want to wear those masks in an aircraft, maybe it's a good idea with the COVID-19 scare that for a year or two, while the scare is still there, to retrofit our aircraft that if you fly, you put your mask on, because then you don't mind who's sitting next to you, because the air that you get will automatically be circulated and cleaned via UVC technology. You see that a lot of the type of automation we can bring in can change the current structure and unlock, for example, safer travel, where a lot of people might be very scared of doing so. So that is how technology and a changing environment can unlock new opportunities. We've seen this all around. In China, for example, this is how they clean their public transport buses. So they've got these massive sheds with ultraviolet lights, and they park their trains and their buses there overnight, which literally desanitizes or sanitizes the bus because of the challenges they face in other words. So literally, this is how the environment is adapting. You can, for example, see the same thing happening in cleaning services in hotels or places where there's a number of people that congregate, where some of these technologies can be utilized far more effectively. We've seen a big uptake. Companies like Osram, for example, have changed all of their tube manufacturing, the globe manufacturing for UVC. So we're going to see a tremendous amount of UVC lights emerging soon. And you can clean your cell phone from all viruses, and you can clean your all of the groceries you buy with UVC boxes. A whole bunch of things will come our way. But the impact goes far beyond just the scare of the virus. It has a massive impact on our economy. And just a brief overview of some of the areas that will be impacted. So massive impact on the top side of your screen. Here we talk about gaming, consumables, lodging, transport. Lesser impact or moderate impact on a variety of other industries of manufacturing, oil and gas, and very low exposure that we're seeing in areas like packaging and telecommunication. So a brief insight into some of the industries that might be more open to change based on the impact of Corona. I'm going to leave this. We hope to share this presentation with you. You can go over this in your own good time. That's not going to be the key part of our presentation. I'm highlighting some key elements before we get into the meat of the presentation. And the first one that you already know about is called the bullwhip effect. This is the change we see in the value chain. So with COVID-19, we not only had an impact on the demand side, but on the supply side as well. So there were supply interruptions and demand interruptions. And whenever that happens, we have this bullwhip effect. It means that for a period of time, there's a shortage of ventilators, and there's an overdemand, and then there's a oversupply of face masks, and then there's a shortage. And this creates havoc with prices. So be very careful in terms of consumable prices for the foreseeable future, as this bullwhip effect will either push the prices up and then put an oversupply in the market, which will then have a rapid decline or reduction in prices. So it's something you need to be aware of. Be careful. Don't get taken away by the flood at the same time. But it's an important key element in your short-term strategic planning. I thought that it's prudent that I throw that in as part of our discussions around which industries will be affected. But let's return to the bulk of our presentation. And we're going to start our presentation in terms of how do we navigate the future and complex adaptive systems in the third talk that I will give in this series. So getting back, let's take a look at the major mega trends. And the very first point of departure will be demographics. Yes, demographics is literally one of the key elements to consider. And let's quickly take a look at where we are currently. If we take a look at human existence, recorded human existence, we've never been more than 1 billion people until the year 1800. And then from that point onwards, we shot up exponentially. The current figures close to about 8 billion people in the world. And the question is, how do we sustain a growing population? We sustain it through new technology and by changing our means of production so that we have more productivity and efficiency in order to sustain a larger growing population. That is literally the key. But as William Gibson said, the future already happened. It is just unequally distributed. And that's also the case in terms of world demographics. So when we take a look at the world population, you'll see that that small little circle you see on the screen has got more than 50% of the world's population in it. So India, China, and Indonesia makes up 50% of the world's population. And the rest of the world, well, let me show you what happens with demographics. This is the world population pyramid. And the pyramid normally shows male and female left and right. And we also have the amount of population growth in each one of those genders. So for example, with boys, we got a 4.5% increase year on year, and then 4.2% in terms of females. And literally what we see is that over time, it declines briefly as the world. So we estimate that we will have approximately 12 billion people by the end of this century. That's in 8 decades from now. But as I said before, it's unequally distributed. And the first one we need to take a look at is the USA. Take a look at the US population pyramid. It's not showing us. It's relatively stable and growing slowly but surely. Take a look at China. China's one-child policy didn't work out that well because we have huge variances in the population growth rate. And where the population were declining naturally through the one-child policy, it declined the population even more. This will have a huge impact on automation. Imagine this. And when we talk about Japan, that case will even become more abundantly clear. So when we take a look at China and Japan, this is the Japanese story. In Japan, they're selling more adult nappies than baby nappies. For every 100 people that die, only 72 gets born. So this means Japan is in a population death spiral. The economic crisis that hit them 30 years ago with the overinflated currency that they were printing left, right, and center led to a 40-year decline in the economy, and they still aren't out of it. Their debt is increasing head over heels. And it's no wonder the Americans opened swap lines with the Japanese, because at a certain point, the Japanese were trying to sell American treasury bonds, government debt, which would have been detrimental. It would have saved Japan for a short period of time. But hey, fortunately, the Americans are still printing money. What impact does this have on automation? Think of it. Japan is running out of young people. These are the guys that have to work to sustain an older growing population. So automation is very important for Japan as their population becomes less. No more can they focus on labor-intensive industries, and automation therefore comes to the fore. The impact this will have on your industry is that companies like Korea, China, Germany will all focus on higher automation, which means more competition between the automators, hoping for better prices, which you can then import into your industry in order to unlock population, in order to unlock economic growth and productivity growth in our ecosystem. So that's part of the picture where our demographics plays directly into the importance of automation of a variety of industries. But nonetheless, let's park that one there for the moment. Europe is also looking quite bad because they're in an economic death spiral. So is Italy. Italy, every 100 people that die, only I think 73 are being born right now. Literally implosion. And what impact does this have on not only population pyramids, but the world economy? Let's take this closer to home. This is South Africa. If you take a look at the South African population, you've seen a huge abundance of, or huge growth in the population as the optimism of a new dispensation started to appear. And if people feel comfortable and optimistic around the future, they get more kids. That's how it works. Similar to what we'll see 20 years from now, when we look back at COVID-19, there will be a drop in the population figures for a year, mainly because if people are worried about the future, they don't want to get kids. So demographics shows you what happened in the history of a country. And after that initial optimism, you see a decline in the population growth. Unfortunately, in South Africa, a huge amount of people below the age of 18 are sitting without jobs. And that it complicates the automation debate. We'll speak about that in due course. This is, however, Africa. If you think South Africa looked interesting, look at Africa. Yes, the rest of the world is declining in numbers and will decline from about 2050 onwards, but Africa will keep on growing. We anticipate that Africa will grow from 1.2 billion people to 4 billion people by the end of this century. And if we compare the different countries, we see that America slowly but surely keeps pace, with most of the other continents will decline. So even Asia, the massive population in Asia, will show a decline from about 2050 onwards. But look at Africa. That purple line in the middle is literally showing a massive, massive increase in population numbers, meaning that our food production, our operations need to be upskilled in order to ensure that this growing population can be sustained in the decades and centuries ahead. So that's where we're currently at, a massive growing population. And the question is, how will this impact not only the automation industry, how will it impact global politics? Well, let me show you. You see, with a declining population rate, there's some really, really interesting things happening in the world around us. As we are growing older and we are staying healthier as we grow older and the population rate declining, this has a huge impact on geopolitics. And let's briefly explain why this is the case. You see, if we take a look at expenditure patterns of individuals through different life ages, this is what you see. When you're young, you don't spend a hell of a lot of money, but then at age 25, that's the lucky ticket, because a wealthy 25-year-old is exactly what you need for a growing economy. You see, at age 25, between that and age 35, you would decide to get married. You might have children. You'll buy a second car. You'll sell your convertible and buy a family wagon. You'll have to put money aside for schooling and clothes. You'll need to buy a new TV. You'll need to buy phones for everyone in the family. So at age 25, boy, you borrow money. You've got financial products, insurance, cars. 25-year-olds drive the consumption economy of our world. That's it. And if you run out of rich 25-year-olds, it leads to huge economic concerns. So remember those demographic pictures I've shown you. What do you think will start happening in places like Italy, in places like Europe, that is running out of affluent 25-year-olds? Because the consumption economy dries up. The biggest part of your consumption economy is driven by the youth. And if the youth significantly declines, that has a huge impact on the growth prospects of an economy. We need to realize that. So this was taken even before COVID-19. The International Monetary Fund, always optimistic. They talked about GDP growth forecast. Look at the number of the population in Italy between the age of 25 and 49 dropping in the next couple of years, in the next decade. So tell me, how the hell is Italy going to grow if the major driving force of their economy, their productive and their consumption part, the group of people between 25 and 49 is declining? I would love to see this. I think those guys at the IMF, you know, I always wondered what the impact of the legalization of Swazi gold was. And maybe now we know, because I'm sorry, you know, it's Pieter against, well, and a few of my other buddies that is up against the International Monetary Fund's GDP forecast. I don't buy it. I'm sorry, I don't. Because the demographics is going against the trend. What else can we see from these changes? If we take a look at the European Union, we're seeing a dramatic decline in the number of affluent 25-year-olds in the next couple of decades. And this means that the economy of Europe will decline. I mean, this whole idea of an economy growing 3% year on year, what happens if the driving force of your economy is declining? You can't possibly sustain this idea of growing your economy 3, 4, 5% a year. It literally is trying to maintain what you have rather than growing it in a declining population force. And they might have to reconsider the immigration policies. That's going to be part and parcel of the politics, but that's another story for a different day. Let's take a look at Russia. Russia, rapid decline in their population. This is after the economic crisis in the year 2000. And here's the key problem. You see, Russia's armed forces will halve in the next 10 years, and they are running scared. I mean, Russia's been invaded something like 30 times over the last 500 years. They don't like being invaded. So what Russia is doing is to say, we've got 2,500 miles of border to protect. So we can't do that with a declining armed force. So why don't we push forward into the European gap? And why don't we push over to the southern gap? Because they're worried about Turkey. That's their big concern here down in the south at Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia. So if you want to know why the Russians went into Crimea, it's literally to make the borders they need to protect smaller so that they can protect their country with a smaller force. And what else is the Russians doing? They're automating. They're automating aircraft and tanks because they're no longer going to have soldiers. So they need to have robots to make sure that it can protect or project their military might. Do you see how demographics is changing geopolitics, but it's also changing the focus on automation? So this is China. So if you think, now let's ask ourselves a question, where is the rich 25-year-olds that we are going to sell to? You know, where in the world are they? It's not in China, because the China one-child policy, look at that. By 2040, certain age categories will fall by half. If you take a look at your screen, those that will be between the years of 50 and 55 in the year 2040 will literally be double the size than those that are being born 20 or 30 years later. It literally means you need to build schools and universities and infrastructure and cities to host people, and then they start to decline. And that's what we're seeing in Japan. Ask yourself what impact that'll have on real estate. Ask yourself what impact that'll have on economic growth. But also ask yourself what impact that'll have on automation. Because in an environment with an older growing population, like in China, like in Germany, they have got the manufacturing skills, but they need to sell it to someone. And who are they going to sell it to? Yeah, you guessed it, the US. The US is one of the only developed countries with a significant number of millennials. And I know what you think of millennials, but in the United States case, it's actually going to be their saving grace, because this is the part of the population that they'll have the expenditure and provide a productive capacity to grow the economy. So America is looking very good as far as demographics is concerned. Take America out of the picture, and that's what you see. A massive decline in affluent 25-year-olds. And in South Africa, we have the opposite. We have a huge number of 25-year-olds, but they might not have the skills right now to play in supporting a growing economy. And that's going to be some of the challenges we're going to face in order to ensure that the technology we have provides the necessary skills so we can improve overall productivity to support us and our ventures, specifically as there will be huge demand in Africa. The picture you see on the screen right now are the areas where you get positive or an acceleration of the growth rate. And that's the only two parts in the world really, is Sub-Saharan Africa and the USA. Okay, the second one, let's take a look at how demographics has an impact. And demographics will have huge impact on a pension crisis, on increased healthcare costs, demographic death spirals, and a demographic explosion in other parts of the world. So there's literally massive changes that we're facing. And the second most important trend we need to bring in is geopolitics. So to what extent will geopolitics change this game? Well, geopolitics will firstly have an impact on a complete realignment of the political order. For those of you that want to know more, go and read the book called The Fourth Turning. Every single civilization or generation goes through changes as we build a system, and the inconsistencies in the system start working against it. There's an implosion, and then we have another generation. And what we've seen is a move in America to the extreme left and the extreme right. The interesting thing is both the extreme left and the extreme right want America to get the hell out of Dodge. They want people to go back to America. They don't want to get involved in the world. The extreme left under Bernie Sanders, his voice is slightly more quiet right now, but this is literally what we're seeing, a move in America to decouple themselves from the world. And that's the concern, because right now, that is how the world or the structure of our world can be typified by this picture. I do apologize for the noise in the background. That's my omega-3 egg project. But what you'll see here is the Bretton Woods system. So the Bretton Woods system was literally created in approximately 1944 as it generated an entire new environment of unlocking global order linked to the decimation after the Second World War. So the Second World War, the Americans realized they've got a new enemy called the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was literally the key challenge. So for America, they said, we want to create an environment where the entire world order can choose a side. Either you choose the Soviets or you choose us. But for America, it was always about security. So the Bretton Woods system was all the countries decimated by the Second World War, and having them aligned with America, they could react against the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union then had their own alignment that took place. This literally brought us to this. So if you take a look at America right now, if you cut off exports to America today, this will only impact about 5% of their population. Impact 5% of their GDP. You see, if you take Mexico and Canada out of the story, currently the exposure of America to imports and exports is about 10 or 12%. That's it. If you take Mexico and Canada out of the loop, what happens? You literally have 5% of GDP growth that is going to be affected from imports and exports. So we are sitting in a situation where America can literally shut down imports and exports tomorrow, and it'll only impact 5% of their economy. That's it. Look at places like the Netherlands and Germany and South Africa. We're close to 50 to 60%. In the Netherlands, 50% of the economy is linked to exports and imports. In South Africa, about 25%. But America currently has 200 military bases around the world. They have massive amount of armed forces to protect a world order, but they don't benefit out of it. And this is what Trump is saying. If the rest of the world is not paying for security, why should America pay for it? Because their benefit from the world is no longer there. Now, trade is one part of the story. The other part of the story is energy security. So America's got armed forces and battle groups around the world to protect the entire environment. But look at the energy security. The amount of exports of oil have dropped consistently over the last 2 decades. This is oil exports to America 2007, oil exports in 2015, and look at today. This is the current export scenario for America. And that means that America might pull back from the rest of the world. They might pull back out of NATO, because for America, they're not going to be attacked. They're sitting with 2 oceans either side of them. They've got a brilliant, productive infrastructure with big rivers that move goods around. They've got a growing population. And we all know that Europe and China and Japan want to export to America. So what is America doing? America is saying, hey, boys, if you want to play with us, you're going to face higher import tariffs. And all of those companies, American companies that's sitting in China currently, how do we get them back? We'll do 2 things. One, we'll drop their tax rate. So it's easier for you to actually come back to America. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to increase the import barriers. So the import barriers that is being faced will literally mean that companies have to relocate back to America or to Mexico, because Mexico will be the low-cost manufacturer for America in years ahead. But America is decoupling itself from the rest of the world. And you need to ask yourself, how is this changing the status quo? If you are exporting to America, Europe is next, by the way. America is going to tell Europe, listen, you want to sell your Mercedes-Benzes, Audis, and BMWs in America, you better manufacture it in America. So create the jobs in America, and then we can talk. Otherwise, you're going to pay high import barriers. So understand that in a world of raising trade tensions, then you have to ask yourself how automation will play a role in that space as well. And this is some of the key mega trends and major trends that is impacting our world. I've got 5 minutes left on my presentation. Let me briefly take you through how this plays out. You see, if America pulls back from the rest of the world, we might have a kinetic war in Eastern Europe as Russia pushes forward. We might get a kinetic war in between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That might be next one. And then the next one is China reinforcing itself. You've already heard of the shots being fired between China and India, but China being far more aggressive, seeing that America is pulling back. So we might see invasion of Taiwan. We might see proxy wars in that vicinity. These are the areas of conflict in the next years ahead. And you need to be careful in choosing your strategic partners in automation, being aware of some of these changes coming your way. So China, what do they do? You know, what I'm telling you right now is not new. I mean, in the world of diplomacy, China they've seen the movie. They know what it's about. That's why in 2014, they started the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative, firstly, to protect the energy flow. That's why they went to Sri Lanka and Djibouti and Mombasa, gave them a hell of a lot of money, and when the people couldn't pay it back, they simply took ownership of those ports. So right now, military aircraft, satellites, missiles, submarines are all based on those ports to protect the energy supply. Because the moment you cut China off from oil, their economy is at a standstill. So that's the one road. The other road is the trade road infrastructure. So the belt is on terra firma, on earth, on the ground, and the road is the sea road. That's how they defined it. So this is China's response to the decline of the Bretton Woods system that America wants to pull out of. And that's what defines geopolitics. Increased trade wars, increased weaponization of the dollar, increased chance of a kinetic war. The last part we need to briefly talk about is the economy, and this is not looking good. We are looking at a massive, massive increase. And if you think that the world is strange, where COVID-19 cases are exploding across America, we have a decline in real economic activity, and at the same time, the stock exchange is going ballistic and reaching heights we've never seen before. We live in a world of extremely strange new rules. And I'm briefly just going to give you one or two ideas of why this happens. If we take a look at sovereign debt, this will explode. We are now looking at a shortfall of about 15% on our budget right now, as you right know. And we might join the 100% debt to GDP club if we're not careful. Debt around the world is increasing, not only in terms of governments, also in terms of banks, corporates, as well as individuals. And the scary thing is, we say the world is $240 trillion in debt. And we think, so what? Think of a trillion. A million seconds, as individuals, we say, oh, a trillion is 1,000 times more than a billion, and a billion is 1,000 times more than a million. But if we convert that into time, a million seconds is 11 days. A billion seconds is 31 years. A trillion seconds is 31,000 years. So understand where we're in. We're in a very, very deep hole. And all of these countries around the world, the major economies in the world, is drowning in debt, truly drowning in debt. And what this literally means is that tomorrow's taxpayers will have to pay back the debt that these governments are now generating. This picture was taken early in the year, $23 trillion debt and unfunded liabilities of $128 trillion. This is the picture I took last night. The current debt of the US is $26 trillion. The unfunded liabilities, these are the pension funds for firefighters, policemen, and so forth, is 152 trillion. The scary part is, out of all of the sick horses, America, all of the horses of the world is in the glue factory. But America is the prettiest looking horse in the glue factory. The problem is they've got a huge debt crisis. And we have to see how that plays out. I'm going to share one final screen with you before I open up for questions and answers. So this is literally it, guys. There we see it. Very low interest rates over the last decade. Look at the green line. The green line shows the GDP or the income of America over the last 10 years. Look at the blue line. The blue line is the value of the stock exchange. How is that possible? It's very simple. A big part of it is share buybacks. Let me explain briefly what it means. So let's say you've got 1 million shares in the market and you have a profit of 100 million for the year. So what's your earnings per share? It's simple. It's $100 per share. So you measure your CEO and your management team and the value of your shares based on the earnings per share. So you use the cheap money to buy back your shares from the market. The guys you buy out smile because they get 10% higher fee than what normally would happen. But then, now instead of having 1 million shares in the market, you have 500,000 shares in the market, but your income is relatively flat. So now you have 100 million in revenue, but you only have 500,000 shares that's outstanding in the market. What does that mean? You have earnings per share of 200. Boy, the CEO scores, the CFO scores, all the shareholders score, but nothing is changing. So we suddenly live in a world where the stock exchange is growing bonkers, but there's no real change in the underlying economic structure of our world, with declining population rates, huge increase in debt, and a world that doesn't make any more sense. That's where we currently are. In the next section, we'll talk about what are the technologies to unlock the opportunities. Chardonnay, back to you.
Great, thanks so much, Pieter. It's very interesting to get those insights and see how everyone's operating in this current space. And I think it sparks a lot of questions. There is one question that has come through so far asking how would it affect the world if America pulled out? I think it was with reference to when you were talking about NATO.
Okay, so we need to be very clear about it. If you take a look at the traditional politics between America, left and right, that has completely been upended. It's now populists. We have a populist movement on the far right, a populist movement on the left, and a centrist movement. The guys in the center, they want to be in the world. They want to influence world affairs. Remember, this is also the grouping where the military industrial establishment in America plays, because in America, they've got dedicated production lines to make weapons. And by being involved in the rest of the world, they can sell their weapons to everyone, to Saudi Arabia, to guys in Europe. So there's a huge amount of money that America, a group of people in America can make by being involved in the world. Because by being involved militarily, there's a demand for military goods and you can sell your goods to your friends, all right? So the military backers are the ones that normally supported the Republican Party. I would argue that they will pivot and they will support, this is why all of the old establishment guys are now pivoting towards a centrist candidate, which would be Joe Biden. And if Biden comes in, we might not see America move out of the rest of the world as much. Bernie Sanders and a Trump, they have this mindset of populism. We want to bring back jobs to America. We want to remove our commitment from the rest of the world and the money we spend on the security of the world and bring it back. But there's a number of companies in America that will be hurt if this happens, specifically the military industrial complex. So my guess is this. I think that the vice president of Biden will be a female. She'll be non-white, and she'll have a military career. And I am willing to take a bet on that, which means that the military is now backing Biden to ensure that they still have a role in the world out there. So that'll be my bet. So the election coming at the end of this year will influence the speed at which America pulls back or not.
Great, thanks for that. There was one comment that had come through just saying that surely the economic system needs to change. This has been coming for a long time. And another comment specific to that question that said, can't USA simply tap into their gold reserves, gun in the pocket, to address the debt level if it starts spiraling?
They do. I think the gold levels they have is about half of their debt right now, but that's not their problem. Their problem is not their debt. Their problem is their unfunded liabilities. I mean, this is for the next 20 years. So I think the gold reserve they have is about half of their debt, if I'm not mistaken, depending on the value of the gold price. As the gold price goes up, they'll be covered to some extent. The biggest problem is the baby boomers that are retiring. And as more and more people, the baby boomers is a larger part of the population retiring right now. And this is a huge debt burden. There's a complete underfunding of pensions. That's what also driving the stock exchange is this pension funds that want 7% year on year. Ever since 1990, pension funds have been underfunded. So don't miss the pension crisis that America is hitting. So it's good for their current short-term debt, but boy, their unfunded liabilities are going to kill them. There's not enough gold in the world to cover their unfunded liabilities.
Great, thank you. Then just having a look at the automation and technology industry, there's a question around what will the industry look like in a post-COVID-19 world? And then just tying nicely into that, it's just looking at your analysis. What is the outlook for Africa and specifically South Africa?
So in the second set of seminars we're going to be doing, I'm going to talk about what are the technologies we can utilize to unlock opportunities. So we're going to talk about the HoloLens, and we're going to talk about how to negate the questions people have around automation and the queries they have on it. So I've got an entire 20-30-minute presentation that will speak directly to that. But in terms of Africa, we're in a very difficult situation because we need to convince people that we need to, let me go one step back. I will send through 2 video clips that you can watch. That is brilliant. The one is called How the Economic Machine Works. And then there's another guy from Brown University. He swears like a sailor, but really, really interesting insights. And that is around the economic models, the economic cycles, where we might go into deleveraging, where our economic model will decouple. Because I don't have the time to explain all of it in more detail. I wish I had. But I will send you some of the video clips if you're interested that will talk about the economic models. In terms of Africa, we've got a couple of challenges. We've got a huge amount of people that are being born. That means we need more productivity to support a growing workforce. However, from a political perspective, there will be pressure on job creation. And that's your key challenge because the two are literally not aligned. You need more productivity in order to create an environment that can be resilient enough to compete with the productivity levels of other people in the world or other countries in the world. At the same time, you need high productivities to support the growing population, but you don't have the same economic impetus. So I think for Africa, we need to really reassess our economic models. We need to take a look at countries like Rwanda, which encourages entrepreneurship, which encourages economic growth, because prosperity is linked to productivity. Prosperity is not linked to money printing. Or the spending by either the Reserve Bank and giving it to the minister. I mean, none of that makes sense. The growth of an economy is directly linked to our productivity, and automation can play a massive role in increasing South Africa's productivity. And I think if we can make that point, we've won the argument.
Great. I think we're going to go for our last question, which is still relating to the subject that we've just covered. There's a comment around it being fascinating. What impact would COVID and the collateral such as work from home, etc., have on the future predictions mentioned in this presentation? And secondly, would it accelerate or decelerate automation in South Africa?
This is where the third talk will come in, because it becomes very difficult making these predictions. It's focusing rather on the question of agility and the creation in what we call strange attractors. Let me be brief. If we take a look at 2006, if we said, hey, in 2 years' time, you will drive around at night and pick up strangers in your car and you will let strangers live in your house, you would think this guy's crazy. But after the financial crisis, people started using Uber and Airbnb to supplement the income. So in an environment of stress, we see that people are more open to changing behavior patterns. And this means that as certain attractors form, now, even after the financial crisis, Uber and Airbnb became a method of doing things. So in a period of crisis, it's an ideal opportunity to create a pattern of thinking or a pattern of behavior. And the stronger that pattern of behavior becomes, the stronger that then resonates in future years. So the question is, will automation play a role in the future? It's not predetermined. It's not physics of predicting it. No, it's an interaction of you as automated practitioners that create that opportunity in the market. And as that opportunity in the market starts getting traction, deepening that attraction to then take it beyond COVID-19 to make it a permanent feature of our economy. We'll talk about that in the third class. So I can't predict what automation will do, because you are the ones to make that prediction. You can create the future. You can influence it. It's not a matter of prediction. It's a matter of how you interact with the environment and what the results of that interaction is that will create the future, not a prediction from an academic like me.
Great. Thanks very much, Pieter. I think we're very well informed and it gives us better food for thought, and applying it to the industry. I think everything is so flexible at the moment and ever changing that I guess we don't have all the answers as it stands at this point, but we look forward to getting those other insights that you will be giving us in the other two webinars that will be coming up in the very near future. So thanks very much for that. It was really, really informative. And thank you to Jane and Johan for joining us as well. I think we've had a lot of information overload in this session, but to those people who have attended today, thank you very much. We have got a full calendar of innovations, insights into the industry, and lots more information to share. They do happen on automation and technology Tuesdays and Thursdays. So watch out on our website and our social media platforms for those dates and information around which sessions are happening when. And these sessions are also recorded and can be watched after the fact on our website and our YouTube channel. So once again, thank you to everybody for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Automation and Technology Tuesday and Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day.